Hey friends, how's it going? Hey friends, welcome back to another video. My name is Ever and I am currently a resident physician finishing up my internal medicine resident. But in today's video, I wanted to talk to you guys about how I even got to this point. I'll be talking to you about how I got into medical school from the beginning, taking you back to high school all the way to during my college days. I'll be talking to you guys about my MCAT, my GPA, my extracurriculars, research activities, leadership activities, anything that I think will be useful for you. And also, I'll give you guys some tips about what activities I would recommend during the COVID pandemic. I know that it's hard for you guys to get activities, clinical activities. So I'll give you guys some info about what that means for your incoming application cycle. So taking you guys back all the way to high school, early on, I kind of really enjoyed science. I really enjoyed bio, specifically chemistry wasn't the best subject for me. So I ended up going to a four-year university. My GPA in high school was 3.3, wasn't the best, wasn't the worst. But it was enough for me to go to a local state school in California. I ended up going to school, a four-year university where I majored in bio in the beginning, but I fell in love with chemistry. So it's something that for you guys to realize that sometimes the classes you like in high school might not be what you end up majoring in. At least that was the case for me. But it wasn't until I started kind of realizing that bio was very interesting, and I knew that I was interested in science. But it wasn't until I started doing clinical experience that I fell in love with potentially becoming a physician. But when I switched to chemistry, it was because I really enjoyed the subject. It wasn't because I was thinking of medicine in the beginning. So I majored in chemistry. And in terms of my GPA, that's something that I'll talk about from the beginning. So my GPA at the end of my 4 years as a chemistry major was 3.6. That was both total and then cumulative, and then science GPA was like 3.55, around there. So they were both about 3.55. And one thing that I want to get you guys to understand is that it doesn't matter what you start with. It really depends on the upward trajectory, the upward trend of your GPA. So if you have like a 2.5 now as your freshman year, that's okay, as long as you increase your GPA the following year to above a 3.5, above a 3.3, you'll be able to still get into medical school. So what we look at when we sit during admissions committees is obviously your overall GPA, but also the upward trend. If you showed a dramatic improvement in your grades every year, that really is important to us. And it shows that you obviously improved and you learned something about yourself because of that initial GPA that wasn't the best. So that's number one, is upward trend matters. In terms of extracurriculars, so there's a bunch of extracurriculars that you guys can do, and I think it's a lot of, that's the issue currently, is that a lot of people are doing way too much, and because of that, their grades are suffering. So the most important thing is, number one, your GPA. Your GPA has to be very good, and like I said, upward trend matters. So if it's not good now, as long as in the end of your 4 years, you have a pretty good overall GPA, I think that's important. But don't do too many activities that's going to make your GPA suffer. That's the other thing that I want you guys to understand, is that if your GPA, overall GPA suffers because of extracurriculars, that's not a good sign. So in terms of what extracurriculars to do, I'll give you guys some examples. So when I was a freshman, one thing that I recommend a lot of pre-meds is actually to focus on your grades in the beginning. I didn't start doing extracurriculars till like the second half of my first year, and that was when I already had 2 quarter grades in. I understood kind of my study habits somewhat. I had a good idea of the time commitment for each class. So moving into the second semester or the third quarter, I had a grasp of my schedule. So that's why I knew how much time to dedicate to studying. And my first clinical experience was actually a program called Clinical Care Extenders, where all I did was just shadow, but it was something still important for getting that experience. I went and I worked in the medical surgery units. I saw what the physicians were doing, what the nurses were doing. It was mostly shadowing the nurses, but it was still clinical experience. So what I say to everybody who's questioning what a clinical experience is, if you're having patient contact, that is clinical experience. If you're working with patients in the hospital, in the clinic, as long as you could talk to them, as long as you could see them, that's clinical experience. If you're in CVS doing pharmacy, those are not patients, those are customers. That's not clinical experience, unfortunately. So that's kind of a quick way of knowing if it's clinical experience or not. So the other clinical experience that I also found myself doing was I was working in a clinic my first year, and I'm a Spanish speaking bilingual person, so I was actually able to help interpret Spanish and English to a lot of the medical residents that were working in that student-run health clinic. So another thing is, if you have an important skill, if you speak a different language, and there's this patient population that maybe speaks that language, that there's a discrepancy in medical care because of that, or I would say there's or medical care could be improved because there's a lack of that skill, then I would say you could offer your skills to that hospital or that clinic, and I think it's very important, and it could go on your resume as well. In terms of, that's clinical. In terms of non-clinical, I did mentorship to high school students when I was in college. I also did some tutoring as well. So that's kind of my non-clinical. And then later on, after I graduated college, I ended up doing I was a health educator for a year through the Health Corps program. And I also did more tutoring as well for underserved students. And then in terms of research, this is something that I think you don't have to do, but I think it will give your application a boost. And as long as you show commitment to some form of research, I think it's important. It doesn't matter what research you do. It could be non-science research as well. It just shows that you're interested in academics. I think that's important, because in the end, medicine is a lifelong process, and I think it's important for you to understand that through getting that experience. In terms of my experience, I actually worked in an OChem lab. I really enjoyed OChem. A lot of people don't, but I actually enjoyed OChem. So that's something that I ended up seeking people that, so I ended up talking to my professor at the time, and I did really well in the class, and he offered me a position as a student researcher. So if you guys have interest in a specific subject, don't be nervous to go to your professor and ask if they have any opportunities, and you'll be surprised that a lot of people don't do that. So just send them an email telling them that you enjoyed their class, and make it very specific. Tell them what you want to get out of this email. Say, I want to be able to meet with you to discuss any research opportunities. Be very specific. Don't beat around the bush. Just tell them directly what you want, and I think they'll appreciate that. In terms of leadership, so leadership is something that I think is very valued in medical school. It shows that you're committed to a specific passion and you have a voice. So what the leadership opportunities that I did was with those clinical activities that I had, because I was doing them for a while. I actually, after 2 years of working in the clinic, I became a coordinator for smoking cessation program, as well as for the bilingual program there. So that's something that I think it's important. And if you could find at least one leadership opportunity, I think that'd be amazing. So overall, though, just one big thing that you want to take away from your activities is that you want to show consistency. And you want to make sure that, obviously, it's going to look great if you have different activities, but in the end, it's not really for the admissions committee to be wowed. It's for you to be to figure out if really medicine is for you. And that's really what the activities should target, is you. You should do something that you enjoy because you want to get something out of it. And the goal is to really find out if medicine's the right field for you, because it's such a big commitment. And you don't want to spend so much money and time in applying for medical school and realize that you didn't even enjoy the activities in the first place. And yeah, there's going to be moments where you don't enjoy them. Obviously, a lot of busy work for sure. That's normal. But as long as you feel like you're enjoying the process of learning medicine, of you one day seeing yourself in those positions that you see doctors in, I think that's important. Because obviously the things that you're doing currently, like shadowing, is not what you're going to be doing in medicine. You won't be shadowing. You're actually going to be actively doing things. So just take that perspective as well. In terms of the MCAT, so let's talk about the MCAT now. So the MCAT, back when I took it, was out of 45. I took it 3 times, and I studied during my 3rd year for one of them, or I think it was my 4th year for one of them. I did not do so well after I studied for it for a couple months. I was studying during classes. It wasn't very good. I wouldn't recommend that unless you feel like that's something that you can manage. So I would say just take dedicated time to study for the MCAT. So I took it the first time. I actually avoided it. The second time I took it for real, I hadn't really studied as much either for that one. I took it after I graduated, and I didn't do so well after that one. So that I decided to study again during my year off. So I graduated in 2014. That summer I took it. I didn't do well. I took that whole year, 2014, 2015, to study for it. So it took me like 5 months of actually dedicated studying to take the MCAT. And this time I realized that I needed more content review. I didn't take any, you don't need to take upper division bio, but it's helpful, I think. But regardless, I think the most important thing is content review, understanding that before you could tackle questions, you need to understand the actual subjects. So just buy one content review book and just do it. There's a bunch of books, so I'm not going to tell you exactly what I did because I can't remember, to be honest. But all I remember is I was just reading content reviews and then doing questions. And I ended up doing a bunch of questions. I think that was the reason why I did well on the third try. I ended up getting a 30, which was about average. So what I did was I did up to 30 practice tests. And that's a lot. It is a lot actually. But for me, it was the most important thing that I could have done because it allowed me to understand timing. And it also allowed me to test myself for those specific questions. So that was very key for me. And just something that you should also understand is that retaking your MCAT is okay. You could retake your MCAT, but as long as you improve, that's the most important thing. It's not about retaking it. It's really about improvement. So if you could tell yourself that you could improve, then I would say you should retake it then if you feel like you could improve. So the recommendations are actually very important to your application. And I would say spend some time thinking about your letter recommendation writers. They should be someone who knows you personally. This is someone who should know you, that knows you at a personal level, and it's someone that I feel that you could go up to and ask them to write your letter, and you would know that they would say yes. And it's someone that has known you for, I would say, at least a year, or at least has worked with you on a specific project, because they'll be able to talk about your commitment to certain projects, your commitment to an activity, and that letter will be stronger. It shouldn't just be someone who you took a class with and you never even went to office hours and you ended up getting a really good grade and now you want a letter. Those letters are just going to be very, very weak. And I've been a victim of having thought about getting letters like that, and I think in the end it's just going to hurt you. So what I would recommend is choose I think the requirements were 4 letters. I did not have a committee letter. I don't think it's a requirement, but double check on that. And I would say choose at least 3 good letters. In the end, if you don't have one, that's the 4th one could be someone that maybe you don't know as much, but because sometimes it's hard for us to have letter writers, 4 letter writers that have known us for such a long time. So I think 3, as long as you have 3, I think you'll be okay. But if you're a first year college student and if you're watching this video, start making connections now, start going to office hours, start showing interest now, so that in the end you could ask for a letter of recommendation when you apply to medical school. And that's why research is also important, because that research person that you've been working with, you could go back to them after your projects and they'll write you a very strong letter. So in the end, I think those are the top things that I would focus on, and those are all the things that you guys are focusing on now currently. So I hope that helped. The other thing that I would talk about is interviews, but I think that's going to be another topic for a different video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I was really trying to be a little bit more specific in terms of specific tips that I think will help you. Currently with the COVID pandemic, it's hard for you guys to do any activities. So I know it's a struggle. So a couple of things that I would suggest to you guys is realize that everybody else is in the same situation as you, and they'll take that into account when you're applying. So what I would say is try to find just virtual shadowing experiences. You could go online, Google virtual shadowing, and even though it's not going to be very clinical, that's all we can do at this point. And you could put it on your resume, and I think that would still count. But that should not be a substitute for later on when the pandemic is over, for you to get more clinical experience. As long as you're showing consistency, again, that matters. So don't say that just because you have virtual shadowing, that should be a substitute for you not doing clinical experience in the hospital. You should still do that after this is over. So with that being said, guys, I hope you guys got something out of this video. And if you did get something out of this video, please subscribe below, like, and comment for more questions if you guys have. I love making these videos for you guys, and I hope you guys have a great day and stay safe out there. Take care.